Welcome back to The Basement. I'm Steve Lewis. This week, we begin our deep dive into U.S. pop culture in the year 1975 with a look at music in the first quarter, the months of January, February, and March. This will pick up where episode 250, U.S. Pop Culture 1974, Part 7, left off. Let's begin with the first album chart of the year, January 4th, 1975. On that chart, 8 of the top 10 albums were also in the top 10 on the last chart of 1974. We talked about those in episode 250, so I'll go over them again pretty quickly here. One of 1974's big holiday releases, Elton John's Greatest Hits, is in the 6th of an eventual 10 weeks at number 1. In an era where number 1 albums often change weekly, no album has had a longer run at number 1 since Carole King's Tapestry spent 15 weeks at the top spot back in 1971. And Elton John's 10 weeks at number 1 won't be equaled again until Frampton Comes Alive in 1976. Jethro Tull's War Child album is in the 2nd of 3 weeks at number 2. Serenade by Neil Diamond is in the last of 2 weeks at number 3. Fire by the Ohio Players is at number 4. It'll go to number 1 on February 8th. Joni Mitchell's live Miles of Isles album has just entered the top 10 at number 5 on its way to number 2 on February 8th. John Denver's Back Home Again is at number 6. It had been number 1 back on August 10th, 1974. It had dropped down the charts a little before reversing course in December, probably due to holiday sales. It will eventually go back up to number 4 on January 18th. Verities and Balderdash by Harry Chapin has fallen to number 7 after peaking at number 4 in the last week of 1974. Free and Easy by Helen Reddy is at its number 8 peak. Goodnight Vienna by Ringo Starr is at number 9. It'll peak at number 8 for 2 weeks, beginning next week, January 11th. Bachman Turner Overdrive's Not Fragile has just re-entered the top 10. It had been number 1 back on October 19th, 1974. It had been slowly moving down the chart and had bounced back a little bit this week. Turning to singles, as 1975 opens, Elton John has the top album in the country. He also has the top single. His cover of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is in the first of 2 weeks at number 1. You're the First, the Last, My Everything by Barry White is in the first of 2 weeks at number 2. Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas is at number 3. It had been number 1 for 2 weeks, beginning December 7th. At number 4 is Junior's Farm and Sally G by Paul McCartney and Wings. It's listed as a double-sided hit, though I don't recall ever hearing Sally G on the radio. Maybe country stations were playing it. It'll peak at number 3 next week, January 11th. Laughter in the Rain by Neil Sedaka is at number 5. It'll go to number 1 on February 1st. Angie Baby by Helen Reddy had been number 1 last week at the end of 1974. It's now dropped to number 6. Ringo Starr's cover of the Platters' Only You is at number 7. It'll hit number 6 next week, January 11th. Boogie on Reggae Woman by Stevie Wonder is at number 8. It'll go to number 3 for 2 weeks, beginning February 1st. At numbers 9 and 10 are a couple of new singles in the top 10 this week. The Carpenters' cover of the Marvelettes' number 1 hit from late 1961, Please Mr. Postman, is at number 9. The Carpenters' version will go to number 1 on January 25th. And at number 10 is Barry Manilow with his first top 40 hit, Mandy. It's a cover of Brandy, a 1971 single by Scott English. The title has been changed to avoid confusion with the 1972 Looking Glass hit, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. Mandy will go all the way to number 1 on January 18th. Top 10 singles that will come and go in the first quarter include One Man Woman, One Woman Man by Paul Anka with Odia Coates, which will go to number 7 on January 25th. Morning Side of the Mountain by Donnie and Marie Osmond will go to number 8 for 2 weeks beginning January 25th. Gloria Gaynor's Never Can Say Goodbye is a danceable version of the Jackson 5's number 2 hit from 1971, and a clear example of a burgeoning new trend just starting to make the mainstream called disco. It'll reach number 9 on January 25th. Fire by the Ohio Players will go to number 1 on February 8th. Get Dancin' by Disco Tex and his Sexolettes featuring Sir Monty Rock III will go to number 10 on February 8th. It's a record that could appear in the dictionary to define camp. Linda Ronstadt's new single, You're No Good, You're No Good, You're No Good, Baby You're No Good, I'm gonna say it again, You're No Good, is her first top 10 hit and, as it will transpire, her only number one. It'll reach number one on February 15th. Pick Up the Pieces by the Average White Band will go to number one on February 22nd. Some Kind of Wonderful by Grand Funk is a cover of an obscure single by the Soul Brothers 6, which had gone to number 91 in 1967. Grand Funk's version will go to number 3 on February 22nd. John Lennon's Number 9 Dream will peak at number 9 appropriately on February 22nd. The Eagles' Best of My Love will go to number 1 on March 1st. Carole King's Breezy and Optimistic Nightingale will go to number 9 on March 1st. Lonely People by America will hit number 5 on March 8th. Lady! The story of a man who meets a lady standing all alone and asks for all her love is the first hit for Styx. For a little while after this, they will have seemed to have been one-hit wonders until they start racking up big hits on the A&M label later in the decade. Lady will spend 2 weeks at number 6 beginning March 8th. Black Water by the Doobie Brothers is taken from their year-old album, What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits. It'll go to number 1 on March 15th. Can't Get It Out of My Head, a record I really love, is the Electric Light Orchestra's first U.S. hit. Unlike Styx, they'll now become regular U.S. hitmakers almost immediately. Can't Get It Out of My Head will go to number 9 on March 15th. Don't Call Us, We'll Call You by Sugarloaf, Jerry Corbetta will hit number 10 for 2 weeks beginning March 15th. It's Sugarloaf's second and last hit. Their first was the number 3 Green-Eyed Lady in 1970. Turning to albums, among late 1974 releases just hitting their chart peaks are Dark Horse by George Harrison, which will go to number 4 on January 25th. Relayer by Yes, which will go to number 5 on February 1st. New and Improved by The Spinners will reach number 9 on February 8th. Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel will go all the way to number 1 on February 15th. Grand Funk's All the Girls in the World Beware will go to number 10 on February 22nd. And Do It Till You're Satisfied by BT Express will go to number 5 on March 1st. There are also some older 1974 albums doing much better early in 1975 than they had on their initial release. Released in August of 74, AWB by the Average White Band will hit number 1 on February 22nd. Barry Manilow 2 had been released in October. It'll hit number 9 on February 22nd. Phoebe Snow's self-titled album had been released in July. It'll hit number 4 on March 15th. And the Doobie Brothers' What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits had been released way back in February of 74. It'll go to number 4 on March 22nd with the success of Black Water as a single. And Ramsey Lewis's Sun Goddess had been released in October. The album features members of Earth, Wind & Fire on 2 of its 7 tracks. Earth, Wind & Fire's drummer and bassist are former members of the Ramsey Lewis Trio. Sun Goddess will go to number 12 on March 29th. Turning to new album releases, in January, a strange and clearly cheaply produced commercial begins airing on television, advertising a mail-order album titled Roots, John Lennon Sings the Great Rock and Roll Hits. It's on Morris Levy's low-budget Adam 8 label. Though I knew he'd recently had hit records, including a number 1 single, when I saw the commercial for this, I remember thinking that John Lennon must be really down on his luck to be involved in something so obviously fly-by-night. The recordings are oldies covers by Lennon, recorded at sessions in 1973, produced by Phil Spector, and in 1974, produced by Lennon. The recordings had been made in part to satisfy a legal settlement with Morris Levy, copyright holder of Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me, who had successfully sued Lennon for adapting the Here Comes a Flat Top, He Comes Moving Up With Me line from the song for Come Together. The settlement called for Lennon to record 3 Levy-owned songs. With the project taking longer than expected, due in part to Spector reportedly hijacking the tapes for several months, Lennon had given Levy a rough mix of the tapes to assure him that progress was being made. Levy, apparently tired of waiting, issued those tapes on his Adam 8 label. Capitol naturally immediately gets an injunction to stop sales of the album. More about this in a minute. On January 13th comes the first U.S. release of Elton John's debut album, Empty Sky. With Elton John absolutely red hot in the U.S., a lot of people would have been curious and happy to pick up his earliest album. Instead, it's released with a new cover that seemed designed to obscure the fact that this isn't a new Elton John album. I know a lot of people bought it thinking that it was a new album, only to end up disappointed and rightfully feeling deceived. The Ruse will take it all the way to number 6 on March 1st. Released on January 16th, A Song for You by The Temptations, which will go to number 13 on April 26th. It'll turn out to be their last top 20 album. Released on January 20th is Bob Dylan's outstanding new album, Blood on the Tracks. Not a return to form, but a new kind of Dylan album, different, but arguably equal to anything he's ever done. Some even consider it his best. Also in January, Kraftwerk's Autobahn is released in the U.S. It's their first U.S. release and their third album in their native Germany. It had been released to little fanfare in Germany in November 1974. It'll begin getting serious attention early in 1975 when a Chicago radio station begins playing the title track. More about this when we get to the second quarter. Also released in January is Melissa by Melissa Manchester. It won't get much attention at first, slowly rising to number 12 on September 13th, helped by the hit single Midnight Blue. On February 7th comes Mr. Magic by Grover Washington Jr. It's the jazz saxophonist's first hit album and will reach number 10 on June 28th. Have You Never Been Mellow by Olivia Newton-John is released on February 12th. On February 21st, after the Roots debacle, Capitol Apple quickly releases an official version of the John Lennon Oldies sessions, Rock and Roll. This official version, however, contains different mixes and some different edits from the Adam 8 Roots album. The official release also omits 2 tracks, Angel Baby and Be My Baby, which had appeared on Roots, ensuring that Roots will remain a sought-after collectible and be pirated itself over the coming years. It's also around this time that Lennon reconciles with Yoko Ono and moves back into the Dakota Apartments. In interviews around this time, Lennon talks in vague terms about his next album and seems intent on continuing his recording career full speed ahead. In many ways, Lennon has been the most visible of the Beatles since the breakup. Paul McCartney may have released slightly more records and has been touring with Wings, albeit to this point mostly in a low-key way. Lennon has been releasing 1 album per year and is the former Beatle most likely to be available for TV interviews, benefit concerts, protest rallies, award shows, and tribute shows. Among other appearances early in 1975, on March 1st, he makes a memorable appearance as a presenter at the Grammy Awards. On April 28th, he sits down for an interview with Tom Snyder on The Tomorrow Show. His April live appearance on the Salute to Sir Lou Grade is broadcast in the U.S. on June 13th. By mid-1975, he becomes less publicly available, and with no follow-up to Rock and Roll forthcoming, it doesn't take too long for people to begin wondering where John Lennon went, soon even going as far as calling him a recluse. John and Yoko's son, Sean, is born in October. Of course, it's now well known that Lennon began contentedly spending time as a caregiver and house husband. Still, Rock and Roll unexpectedly marked the last most of the public would hear from the once highly visible John Lennon for more than 5 years. On January 18th, Led Zeppelin had kicked off another North American tour in Bloomington, Minnesota, in support of their new long-awaited double album, Physical Graffiti, released on February 24th. The tour had taken a break beginning February 17th. It'll resume with a second leg between February 27th and March 27th for a total of 36 shows. Released on February 28th is Alice Cooper's new concept album, Welcome to My Nightmare. Now, without his longtime band, the first solo Alice Cooper tour in support of the album is a theatrical event complete with dancing spiders, skeletons, and a giant cyclops. It begins on March 21st in Michigan and will continue through August when it moves on to Europe. On April 25th, a TV special based on the album is broadcast late night on ABC, promoting both the album and the tour. Making a cameo appearance on the special and on the album is Vincent Price. Also released in February is For Earth Below by Robin Trower, the double live An Evening with John Denver, and Gordon Lightfoot's Cold on the Shoulder, which will go to number 10 on April 26th. On March 1st comes Katie Lied by Steely Dan. It'll go to number 13 on May 31st. On March 3rd comes That's the Way of the World by Earth, Wind & Fire. On March 11th, we get Bowie's new album, Young Americans. It's a more understated look and a more soulful sound for Bowie and features guest appearances by John Lennon. On March 11th comes the original soundtrack by 10cc. It'll go to number 15 on August 2nd after the single I'm Not in Love becomes a hit. The Funny Lady soundtrack by Barbra Streisand is released on March 15th. It'll go to number 6 on May 10th. Released on April 19th is Hearts by America. It'll go to number 4 on June 14th. And on March 24th comes Chicago 8. The album comes with a giant poster and that most 70s of accessories, an iron-on shirt decal. The album will spend 2 weeks at number 1 beginning May 3rd. Also released on March 24th is Nothin' Fancy by Leonard Skinner, which will spend 2 weeks at number 9 beginning May 31st. Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow is released on March 28th. It'll go to number 4 on June 7th. Also released in March is the soundtrack to the upcoming film version of Tommy. We'll talk much more about it later. Janis Ian's Between the Lines, and Crash Landing by Jimi Hendrix, a compilation of previously unreleased tracks that will draw criticism for having been reworked extensively and overdubbed by session players, significantly changing the feel of some of the material prior to release. Nevertheless, it'll go to number 5 on May 10th. And that'll do it for this time. As you can see, 1975 is a busy year. I hope you join me next time when we'll look at news, movies, television, and what our old friends the Beach Boys were up to in the first quarter. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit like if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't. As always, I look forward to your feedback. Have a great week. Thanks for watching. Bye.